Have YouTube videos ever tempted you to customize your Game Boy or other consoles? I see a bunch of videos where people completely transform their gaming handhelds, and they make it look so easy. I've always wondered if an idiot like me, a layman, someone who doesn't have a soldering iron, a home workshop, and education or experience as an electrical engineer, could complete one of these projects. I want to be very clear, this isn't a tutorial. This is me cataloguing my experience of buying and assembling the parts needed for a basic, entry-level, and supposedly easy modification. Is it as easy as everyone makes it look, or is it more effort, risk, and frustration than it's worth for the average person? Would I recommend that you try to do this yourself at home? With that in mind, let's begin. This is my Game Boy Advance. Now, I don't play this thing as often as I'd like to, due to a couple of minor gripes and complaints. Otherwise, this would probably be my go-to handheld. But the good news is there are a lot of mods we can make to this thing to really improve it and make it the thing I always have in my pocket. I usually play my Game Boy Advance games on my GameCube via the Game Boy Player and the high-fidelity fork of Game Boy interface, using my original GBA as the controller. That's perfect for playing at home, but I would love to take this thing on the go with me. I think we all know that the screen is the main issue. Even in good lighting conditions, it can be really hard to see. Yes, the Game Boy Advance SP then came out and featured a backlit screen that's much easier to read. However, it lacks the ergonomics of the base model. It feels uncomfortable to hold, and I get hand cramps after about 20 minutes of play. My GBA has also seen better days, with a lot of scuffs around the body and a massive mark across the screen lens. This handheld has seen a lot of use over the years, and it really shows. Fortunately, the aftermarket for Game Boy Advance is massive, with replacement shells, screen lenses, and backlit screens being readily available. Unfortunately, I am a klutz. Both my autism and amblyopia impact my physical coordination, the amblyopia leaves me lacking depth perception, and while reviewing medical records recently, I discovered I'm dyspraxic, which again impairs physical coordination. Doctors have known since I was 14, nobody told me, and I now know why I suck at Guitar Hero. I also have no tools, no soldering experience, and I've disastrously messed up similar projects in the past. Luckily for me, there is a drop-in kit that requires zero case cutting and trimming, and zero soldering. This is advertised as a drop-in screen that any idiot can install into a standard shell. It's also discontinued and replaced with a product that does require soldering. This is where AliExpress and its unauthorized clones come to the rescue. A seller here still offers a copy of that kit, and the reviews seem largely positive. While I'm here, let's grab the replacement shell, screen lens, and tri-ring screwdriver kit too. They're cheaper than the more well-known alternatives, I have to wait for the screen to come from China anyway, and this choice shipping thing presumably means they'll be packaged together. There's even a 7-day delivery guarantee. Spoiler alert, this is by far the biggest mistake I made during the entire process. Shell-wise, I decided to go for a two-tone effect, which meant buying two shells. I made sure to get the two shells from the same seller, the same listing even, to ensure they would be from the same mold and therefore compatible, with no issues fitting together. Yeah, that worked out just fine. It didn't cause me any problems or grief, promise. The colour scheme is very much inspired by this Ice Blue Nintendo 64. Now, I bought myself one of these a couple of months ago when I was feeling a bit sad because I am a child and retail therapy for colourful things makes me happy. With that in mind, the standard black bezel that comes with the shell seems out of place, so I grabbed a white screen lens instead. After all, it's only £1 and it'll add a nice flourish. I immediately ran into issues with my order. While the IPS screen itself dispatched immediately and arrived within its 7-day delivery guarantee, everything else sat in a warehouse for 4 days before even being dispatched. arriving 9 days into their 7-day guarantee, with the exception of the screen bezel, which took 11 days. Everything came in these flimsy plastic bags that offered absolutely no protection in transit. This resulted in water damage to the screwdriver set and the back of the clear shell having a crack in it. Excuse my flailing arms, I originally talked through each item on camera, but the audio quality was too bad to use, meaning I'm here cutting up the footage and recording new voiceover after the fact. Sadly, there's a lot of footage like this that I had to re-record, replace, or dub over. Help me improve my audio quality for on-camera segments, and get some of those foam things for the walls and a lapel mic by sharing this video around, subscribing, and joining my Patreon. Shoutouts to my current supporters Crow, Tiny Jericho, Mr. Terry Chaos, Ducky Go, Francis T218, and Deliverator. This was also when I first suspected that something was wrong with these shells. Despite buying them from the same listing by the same seller, they were packaged differently. The blue shell had its own little bag, while the clear one was just loose in there. Different accessories, such as the buttons, were grouped differently, and again, some had bags, some were just chucked in. The screen bezels were also different in terms of print quality and also protection, with one having an obvious square film on top. At first, I wondered if I had simply been sent someone else's return, which in itself wouldn't be great, and I did think about returning them due to the crack in the back of the clear one. Ultimately, I figured I had waited over a week, they were here now, and the crack would be hidden by a sticker in the final build anyway. Little did I know that there was another reason for all of this that would cause a bigger problem later on. I couldn't start the build that day as the screen lens hadn't arrived yet. Every, the wonderful UK courier whose reputation while trading as Hermes was so bad that they changed their name and rebranded, seemingly misplaced the package before eventually delivering it 2 days after everything else had arrived. In that time, I ordered a glass lens from eBay instead, as it was advertised as same-day dispatch using Raw Mail's 48-hour service. 3 problems. 1, they didn't dispatch it the same day, instead posting it almost 24 hours after I had ordered. 2, rereading the description, this has a wider viewing area to accommodate a different aftermarket screen, whereas I needed the normal sizing. 3, when realising it was unsuitable and they weren't going to meet their own SLA for dispatch and delivery, they wouldn't let me cancel the order. Not reading the description properly is on me, but not meeting their same-day dispatch promise and not letting me cancel prior to dispatch when I realised is just the seller being a prick. So yeah, heads up, there are different sizes and you need the right lens for your IPS screen. When the original lens did arrive from Every, it was again in a flimsy plastic bag that had a gash in the back of it. Miraculously, the bezel itself seemed to be okay. At first I thought it was scuffed up and needed to be binned, but it turned out to have a protective film that was cut to exactly the same size as the lens, making it tricky to peel off and remove. AliExpress sellers, why do you package and send things in these awful mini bin bags? In hindsight, I realised there was an option to get a white lens with the IPS screen, so it would have been the right size and in the same box, meaning there would have been no delay, the project would have worked out a bit cheaper overall, and I could have started the build earlier. Onto the build itself, and this is where we discover that A, I am an idiot, and B, this really is not a tutorial. Do not do as I do, I suck. Again, I originally narrated this in real time, but the audio quality was too bad to use and the recording was way too long. Instead, here's a condensed and scripted version. We start with opening the original Game Boy Advance. There are 6 tri-ring screws that are easy enough to see and find, but I got a little stuck and confused when the shell wouldn't open. Turns out there is a 7th Phillips head screw in the battery compartment. This might not have been so hidden in any other GBA, but this is a small black screw in a black shell, so camouflaged pretty well. The back of the case also houses the battery contacts, which are going to be required for delivering power, as I'm going to continue using rechargeable AA's instead of installing an aftermarket USB-C battery pack. I spent more time than I care to admit trying to transplant these into my new shell before realising that the replacement already has battery contacts pre-fitted. Nice little waste of my time and energy there. I then removed the motherboard. This is held down by 2 Phillips head screws, and depending on whether you have a 32 or 40 pin motherboard, these may be in different places. Every video and reference photo I had seen in preparation said the second screw would be on the far left, but mine was actually nearer to the cartridge slot. That initially caused me to think a screw was missing, making me think someone had been inside the handheld before. To be fair, there were other indicators of that, such as seemingly handwritten numbers and light scratches on one of the components. No idea what, if anything, had been done previously, as this GBA, while originally bought used, has never shown any signs of tampering. I also had to carefully unlatch the 32-pin ribbon cable that connects to the screen and gently remove it. I had been fearing this step, and yeah, I was constantly terrified I was going to break something here. Something a lot of videos don't make clear is just how small these parts are. Thankfully, it went okay. Anyway, with the motherboard out, I gave the speaker a quick clean with some isopropyl alcohol, and then I could start prepping the screen and new housing. The screen comes in 5 parts. The screen itself, an accompanying logic board, 2 ribbon cables, one for 32-pin motherboards and one for 40-pin ones, adhesive to keep it in place, and an acrylic spacer to position it. You know what it didn't come with? Instructions. I had to rely on YouTube videos, and with this being a clone, none of them were an exact match for what I was seeing in front of me. I started by seating the short ribbon cable that runs from the screen to its logic board, but I didn't manage to latch it in place. It even pinged out the first time, causing me to reseat it, and I still didn't latch it properly. I won't realise this for another hour after it causes numerous issues and frustrations, but Tails knows, and he is horrified. I added the gasket to hold in the screen, then put the acrylic spacer in the wrong place. Twice. I popped the screen in without removing the protective film, like an idiot, and then had to pull the screen back out. Following a tip from Macho Nacho, I used Kapton tape to keep the screen and logic board together. Following his advice, I also reused the screen's protective film to insulate the board and prevent shorts. My monkey brain then tried to figure out how the ribbon cable that runs from the logic board to the GBA's motherboard should be oriented, and I again didn't latch the cable properly. If there's one thing you should learn from this video, it's to secure the damn ribbon cables in place. Now for what should have been the easy part, dropping in the buttons and membranes. Sadly, the right shoulder button did not want to go in. There's a metal prong that provides a springy feedback and allows the button to work. On my initial R button, this prong was too long, and the button wouldn't fit in the shell. It's at this point that I should have realised that the fonts and moulds of the 2 shells I bought from the same listing from the same seller were rather different. Honestly, getting these shoulder buttons and the grey side plastic to stay in place caused me no end of grief throughout this entire process. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? I dropped in the motherboard and carefully tried to attach the 32-pin ribbon cable. This was my first clue that it wasn't properly latched to the logic board, as the cable just sprang right out. Even I knew that shouldn't happen. I then tried doing it the other way around, attaching the motherboard end first and then the logic board. Now, the GBA's motherboard has proper latches, which makes it very obvious when you have or haven't done it right. If only the logic board had this style latch too. Genuinely, I have over an hour's footage of me trying and failing this one connection. I then attempted to place the back shell on, but it wouldn't close up. Initially, I wondered if there was just too much bulk inside the casing, so I opened it up and removed the sticky gasket for the screen to save a couple of millimeters blow. Still, it wouldn't close. My recording died here, but I found that the speaker hadn't been seated properly. It has a notch on one side to ensure it goes in the right way. Because it wasn't seated flush, that was pushing that side of the board up. Sadly, even once that was resolved, these 2 shells from the same listing by the same seller, there is a reason I keep repeating that, were seemingly from different molds and they just don't fit together. There's still a gap, even in the finished thing. Before applying the screen bezel, I did a test fire of the system and... sound with no picture. Fantastic. This caused me to disassemble and reassemble the thing 3 times before A, testing before full reassembly, and B, eventually being frustrated enough to push the ribbon cable latches down harder, no longer caring if they broke. I was done by this point, and hearing a click that confirmed that this time they had actually locked in place. I cannot stress how much unreasonable, excessive force it took for the logic board's latches to actually clamp down and do their job. I then ran into another problem. The buttons felt a little shallow, presumably where the mismatched cases, again from the same seller and the same listing, wouldn't fully close. It's fine, perfectly playable, but I know it could feel that little bit better. I did open the GBA up again just to see if there was anything else in that general area that could be reseated to help, but one of the soft, flimsy screws the AliExpress seller provided stripped. So, I guess this is as good as it's ever going to get! So, all said and done, would I recommend this project for you? God no, absolutely not, no! Let's start with the good. After spending over 3 hours on what was supposed to be a 20-minute job, I finally have a working backlit Game Boy Advance. I have to admit, that screen is beautiful, better than the GBA SPs by a mile. This is now something I could see myself slipping into my pocket and actually playing. As much as I love my Switch and Steam Deck, neither of them are exactly portable unless you wear 2000 era cargo trousers with massive pockets everywhere. It even kind of matches my Nintendo 64. I was never going to get an exact colour match, but this is close enough. I'd love to have all of my consoles in this scheme, but Millennium and Hello Kitty Dreamcast are off-puttingly expensive. Most aftermarket replacement shells just don't come in this colour, and the experience I had here is more than enough to kill my appetite to swap cases on anything else. To be fair, the IPS screen itself was dispatched quickly, is a drop-in solution, and does work very well. Now that the name brand equivalent has been discontinued, this offers a great alternative for idiots like me who don't want to trim shells or solder wires. My only gripe is just how stubborn the ribbon cable latches are. I should not have had to apply that much force to lock the ribbon cables in place. The little toolset might just be the best buy from the entire project. I can see these having a lot of uses around the house, and it was the price of a Tesco meal deal. Fantastic. For the bad, these shells are cheap, flimsy, and don't fit together. The supplied screws are soft and easily stripped. In some cases, like the first R button I tried, they lack quality control to the point of being unusable. Almost everything was shipped in these flimsy plastic bags with no protection. I'm amazed they travelled internationally like this with this little damage. Even so, a little damaged is still damaged, and I'm thankful it's only the screwdriver set that had water get into it. I would definitely advise spending more money on higher quality parts from reputable sellers, especially those who produce their own kits in-house. Alternatively, and this is maybe the route I'll take in future, buying one pre-made online or at a convention, or commissioning someone who knows what they're doing to build it for you. The extra £60 to £100 for a 100% spot-on GBA costs a lot less than losing a frustrating 3 hours of my life for an end result that's maybe 80% of the quality and satisfaction I was hoping for. I was able to get it to be good enough, but paying someone else could have given me something that was perfect. Don't assume it's as easy as YouTubers make it look. They have more knowledge, tools, and experience of these things than most of us. They've probably done a couple of practice runs before filming, and the magic of editing means that they don't have to show us their mistakes. People present their best selves online. No one wants to come onto the internet and say, I found this thing that was supposed to be really quick and easy to take ages and be quite difficult. I believe loads of people have probably had similar experiences as I have, but were too embarrassed to share them. That leads to a warped perception of what's involved in modifying your handhelds, consoles, and controllers. What's easy to someone who does this every day, either at school, in their day job, or as their main hobby, can be infuriating for you or me. Be prepared to lose time and money on failed attempts, ruined parts, and know that you risk irreversibly damaging your Game Boy or other peripherals in the process. Thanks again to my Patreon supporters Crow, Tiny Jericho, Mr. Terry Chaos, Ducky Go, Francis T218, and Deliverator. If you'd like to help me recoup the costs of this terrible idea, consider signing up to pledge support, or just like, comment, and subscribe for more videos from me in the future.